Hello guys and welcome to my React tutorial for beginners. In this tutorial, we are going to create a to-do app, and what we're gonna learn is basics of React, including creating components, listing items, working with props and state, conditional rendering, and managing input forms. Let's get to code. Here is the final version of this app. What we can do by this app is to create new task like running, and by pressing enter or clicking on add, a new row will be added and it shows the new task. You can set a task as a completed by clicking on the checkbox or by clicking on the task name, and also you can uncheck it by clicking again on the task. Also, you can edit a task like this and save it, and you will be able to delete a task. That's the app that we are going to build together. In this app, what we're gonna learn is using components, creating components, defining states, using props, defining subcomponents inside a parent component, passing data and methods to the child component like this one, using map function to render a list of elements, and also creating forms like this to get input data from users. In this lesson, you will learn handling event, conditional rendering, rendering list, creating input form, managing states, and lifecycle methods in one single app in less than 1 hour. If you are ready, let's open your VS Code and go for the next lesson. Here is the plan to create To-Do's app. First of all, we are going to create a new React application. Open VS Code, and from terminal menu, click New Terminal and enter the command for creating new app. First of all, I'm going to go to the desktop folder and enter npx create-react-app, and the name of folder of this application is gonna be React-todo-app. Press enter to create React application in desktop folder. After creating app, go to the app folder, React To-Do app, and type code and put a dot, and dot points to the React To-Do app folder. By running this command, a new VS Code window will open. So let us start working on this window instead of previous one. So you can close this. And what we're gonna do in this React application, first of all, is running the app. Open a new terminal and run npm start, because I'm in the React To Do app folder. After running npm start, a new tab in your Google Chrome will open and you will have this React application. We are going to convert this to To-Do app. The first step is gonna be creating the main component. Right click in src, create a folder for components, and inside that, right click new file and set file name to main.js. Name of component should start with capital letter. Let us start by creating main component, class main extends React.component. So we need to import React from React. Next command is gonna be defining constructor, and it accepts props, and we need to call super props. The next command is defining the initial state of main component, and we have tasks, list of tasks, and by default we are going to make it an empty array. Put semicolon and save it. Let's go for the next method, which is render. Render function, I'm going to return a div, and inside div put an h1, set the name to to-dos, and create another div. And inside that, what we're gonna do is to create two components. The first one is create task component and create a new line. And the next component is task list component. So the main component contains two other components as a child, and we need to implement them. So we are breaking down a bigger component to a smaller one. Let's go for create task. From Explorer in the components, right-click new file and set file name to create task.js. To create a class-based component here, instead of typing them directly, you can type RCC, which stands for React Class Component, and press Tab. Automatically, you will have a component named create task, and instead of exporting in a new line, it exports directly the class. So we can use this style in the main and directly export default main component. Save it and go to create task and save it too. I'm going to just enter create task here, and let's create and let's import it here. Click on create task, press Ctrl space to get this recommendation, this one. It points to src/components/create task, and click on it to import it like this. Save. Do the same for task list. Right click components, new file, task list.js, type RCC and press tab to create task list component here. Then go to the main and press Ctrl space, press enter to import task list from /task list. Save it and go to task list and enter task list here. Good. Next step, open app.js and get rid of sample data here and enter main component, import it by pressing tab, and you will have main component in the app component. Save it and let's check the result. Here we have to-dos, heading 1, create task component and task list component. I'm going to right click, select inspect, and go to components to see the structure of this React application. App is the parent component. It has main as a child, and main has create task and task list as a child too. That's it about this lesson. Let's go for next lesson, which is create task. For create task component, what we're gonna do is to define a constructor that accepts props. Inside that, we have to call super props, and inside that, set state to task. This state is gonna save the task that user entered in the text box. Great. Next step is in the render. In the render, we need to define a form because we are going to get a new task from user. Define a form on submit should be submit handler, should be handle submit. Function, we need to define this later, and we need to use this before that. Inside this form, define an input box, set type of input to text, and place holder to enter task. Set value attribute to this.state.task. It points to this variable. And unchange to this.handle change. Also enable autofocus attribute, and by having this attribute, when you open the application, this input box will have focus. After that, it's time to create a button, a submit button. So set type of button to submit, and the name of button is add because we are going to add a task. Save your form, and here is the structure of create task component. Let's check the result. Can you see this? We have enter task. If we enter characters, it doesn't work. We need to implement handle change. Scroll up right before render, define handle change equal to, I'm using this structure to access to the class component instance using this. And what I'm gonna do is to update state based on the data that user entered in the text box. To access the entered data in the text box, we need to define event as a parameter for handle change and update task with event dot target dot value. Good. This time entering character will work. But if I click on add, it refreshes the page and it doesn't do anything. It's time to work on handle submit. Define handle submit equal to, it accepts events 2, and inside this function, first of all, we need to call event dot prevent default. By having this line, this page will not refresh by clicking on add button. Next step is gonna be creating a task. The create task should run in the parent component because the list of tasks shouldn't be in this component. It should be in the parent component to share the list of tasks between the childs. So what I need to do is to call create task on props, and props means the parent component. This.props.create task, and what I'm gonna pass is the entered value in the input box. It's this.state.task. After that, we need to clear text box. Set state, set task to empty string. Save. If we run this app and enter, let's say, test and click on add, we should get an error. And the error is this.props.create task is not a function. Let's create that function. What is the parent of create task? We need to create function in the parent of create task. For sure, it's main, because in the main we have defined create task as a child in the render function. Let's define create task here. Create task equal to this function. It accepts task as a parameter, and if task.trim equal to empty string, we alert task can't be empty. Let's put backslash here to use single quote in the string and return. So if task is empty, we will not add it to the list. And the trim remove spaces around task string. If everything is okay and we have task, we have a value in the task, then what we need to do is to update tasks, and for task push this element, the task itself, and is completed to false. So each task has two attributes, the name of task or the content of task, and the Boolean attribute that shows if it's completed or not. By default, a new task is not completed. Put a semicolon here, and it's time to define tasks here. Out of the component, define tasks as an empty array. I'm going to use this task inside the constructor instead of setting task inside state. Use the task that we entered we defined out of the component. Then in the create task, after pushing the new task to the list of tasks here to reflect the change in the UI, we need to update the state too. To update the state, we use this dot set a state and set tasks to the tasks that we have defined out of the component. The reason that we have defined two tasks inside and outside of the component is to use local storage to fetch previous tasks in the application. That's the topic of next lessons. Okay, we created create task inside the main component, and it's time to pass this function to create task component. That's the way to do that. Create task equal to, and copy this and paste it here and use this before that. Great, let's check the result. Enter test and click on add. This time there is no error. Let's say I enter task here and click on add. As you see, there is no error. But the thing is, we cannot see any change in the screen. But if you go to component and click on main, you will see that we have a state here, and inside a state there are two tasks there. Let's add another one and press enter. Can you see this? We have task here, and here is the data of task, new task, and is completed is false. Great. What we did in this lesson is to implement create task component, and by adding a new task, we have the new task inside main component as a state. That's it about this lesson. Let's go for the next lesson, which is task list. For the task list component, what we need to do is to create a table in the render function. Get rid of div and create a table. Inside table, define table head and define table row inside that. And the first cell in the table head is task, and second cell is actions. After that, create table body And inside table body, what I'm gonna do is to access to the list of tasks from the parent component. And to access to parent component, we need to use this.props. Inside that, access to tasks and use map function to convert each task and the index of that task to this component. Here I'm gonna use task item, which is a new component that I need to create. Set key of this component to index to prevent warning, and pass task to this component using this code, and set an ID to task item as an index of array in the task array. That's it. And let's define task item. From RC components, right click, new file, and set the name to task item.js. Type RCC, press tab to create task item. And inside that, we need to have table row and 2 column, first TD and second TD. The first TD is gonna have this dot props dot task dot task. To having duplicate task, what I'm gonna do is to go to the task list and rename this to task item, and then inside the task item make it task item dot task. And the second one is gonna be action. Just put a button and for edit and for delete. In the task list component, we need to import task item like this. And also we need to go to main component and pass tasks to task list component. Tasks equal to this dot state dot tasks. Good. Let's check the results. Here, enter task, walking, and press enter. We have walking as a new task here. Reading book. Great. We implemented a very simple task list here. That's it about the task list lesson. And for the next lesson, we are going to implement delete capability. Let's go for it. To implement delete function, what we need to do is to define a new method, is to define an event handler for delete. Let's implement that. On click equal to this dot delete task. And we need to define delete task here. Delete task equal to this arrow function. And to implement delete, we just pass this responsibility to the parent. So in the parent, we need to define delete task and pass this dot props dot id, which is the id or index of this task in the tasks array in main component. Let's define delete task in the parent component of task item, which is main. And here I'm going to define delete task. The parameter is task ID. And inside this function, what we need to do to delete a task is using tasks.splice function. It accepts 2 parameters. The first parameter is the starting point to delete, and it's the index of task ID. And second one is the delete count. we are going to just delete this task. So it's gonna be 1. And then update the state based on the new task. That's it. Let's check it. Add a new task and click on delete. We are getting this error, this.props.delete task is not a function. Let's fix it. In the task list, we need to pass delete task as a props to task list. It's gonna be like this. Check it again, enter a task and click on delete. We're still getting error because we need to pass delete task in the task list to task item. It should be delete task equal to this.props.delete task. So it's very important. We are going to pass a function from parent to child and from child to the inner child. That's the way to do that. Let's test it. Enter test and click on delete. Yes, it works. Great. We implemented delete functionality for Todo's app, and it's time to go for edit capability. Edit is a bit tricky because we need to have 2 states for task item component. Because it's a state, we need to define a constructor that accepts props. We pass super props, and let's define the state. In the state, we have task, which is coming from props task item dot task, because by default, when we are going to edit a task, it should has the previous value of the task, which is this, and is editing. By default, it's false. The next step is gonna be defining set editing state, and it accepts is editing as a parameter and update state based on the is editing. So having is editing only here, it means that we are using this code. It's the shorter version of this code, which update is editing in the state based on the is editing that user entered. Good. Let's go to the render function, and inside that, what I need to do is to define a conditional rendering. If this.state.isEditing is true, I need to render 2 TDs. Because it's 2 components next to each other, I need to use a wrapper like this. By having this empty wrapper, I can put multiple components next to each other. The first dev is gonna show a form, and in this form, I get input, and the value of this input is this.state.task, and for unchange, it's this.handle change. Also, it's autofocus too. Next to that input, for the second column, define a button, and the button is save, and the next button is back or cancel. That's for the is editing to true, and for is editing to false, I need to put colon here and create an empty container like before and cut this td and paste it here. So if isEditing is false, I show the task name and edit and delete button. And when user click on edit, I'm going to show this. So I need to implement onClick here. And for onClick on edit button, what we need to do is to define a function, its inline function, and set is editing to true. By clicking on this, set is editing will run with true as a parameter, and this is gonna make is editing to true and change the state of is editing to true. It's gonna make this state to true, and instead of rendering this part, React will render this part and shows a form. Let's test it. Enter a task and click on edit. This row has been changed to edit mode and it has save and back button. If I enter another task, the other tasks will work. Can you see this? But typing characters will not work here. Let's fix it. We need to implement handle change. Handle change equal to this function, this dot set state, task equal to event dot target dot value. Let's pass event as a parameter of handle change. The next step is gonna be implementing onSubmit. OnSubmit should be this dot handle submit, and in the handle submit function we need to pass event and call event dot prevent default to prevent refreshing the page, and call edit task on the parent component using this dot props dot edit task. What we need to pass is the ID of this task or the index of this task in the tasks array. It's this dot props dot ID. It's coming from here in the task list. We have passed the index of array as an ID to the task item. So in the task item, I can access to that using this dot props dot ID. And the second parameter is the new value for the task, which is this dot state dot task. That's it. Save. And after editing, it's time to update is editing state to false. Good. Let's implement back button here. For this one, I'm going to set type to submit, and for the back button, set type of button to button. So when user click on save button, submit will run, but when user click on back button, we need to handle it manually. What I'm gonna do here is to this dot set edit state to false. Good. Let's test it. Enter a task and click on edit. Make it test1 and press enter. We are getting this error. It says this.props.edit task is not a function. Let's fix it. What I'm gonna do to fix this issue is to go to the main and implement edit task here. Edit task accept two parameters, the task ID and the task which contains the new value for that task. Define task item and fetch the task from the array, and then from task item update the task based on the task that we passed to edit task, and then set a state tasks to tasks. That's it about edit task in the main component, and it's time to pass it to task list component using this code. Then go to task list like what we did for delete task. For edit task, we need to pass it from props to the child component, which is task item. Inside task item and in the handle submit, we have called edit task in the parent, which refers to the main component. Let's test it. Test, edit, test1, and press enter. Yeah, it gets changed. If we click edit and click on save button, it does not work. Let's fix it in the task item. For the button here, for the save button, it's outside of the form. So we need to implement unclick here and call handle submit. Click on it and let's check it. Click edit, make it 2 and click on save. This time it works. Good, we implemented edit task in this lesson, and for the next lesson we are going to put a checkbox before task to make it done or undone. To implement toggle task, changing the state from done to undone, what I'm gonna do is to define a function here right before delete task, toggle task. And for toggle task, we call toggle task from parent component, and we pass the ID of current task to the parent component. Let's go to the main component and right before delete, define toggle task here. The parameter is task ID, and what we need to do here is to get access to the task item from tasks like this, and then update the state of is completed for the task item to the reverse state of current state. So logical not of is completed. So if task is completed is true, the new state should be false, and vice versa. After that, it's time to update state tasks equal to tasks. Save it, and that's about toggle task. We need to pass it as a parameter to the child function, and inside the task list we need to pass it as a parameter to the task list item. Let's save main, and inside task item it's time to use toggle task. Where is the location to use it? It's here, right here. Define unclick, and when user click on the task name, it should run toggle task. Also inside that, I'm going to define a input of type checkbox and make it read-only because it's not gonna change. The parent element will handle updating the state, and the checked state is coming from this dot props dot task item dot is completed, and close it. Also wrap the task inside a span like this, move this inside a span, and for a span define a CSS class using class name attribute, and if this boolean value is completed, is true, set the class name to completed, otherwise to not completed. To set a style like line through for the task name, open index.css and at the very end define completed and set text decoration to line through. Let's check the result. Enter a task and we are getting this error. It says there is a typo in input. Go to task item and change it to input. This time we have a checkbox. If I click on it, yeah, the task is done. The click on the task name itself works too. And to make it like a button instead of having text icon, what we can do is to set a class for the TD here, class name to task, and inside index.css for task set cursor to pointer. By having this, if you move mouse over it, it's like an pointer, like a pointer. Great. We implemented the is done and undone capability. Let's add multiple tasks, and if I click on some of them, they are going to be completed or incompleted. Edit functionality fork 2 and delete 2. Great. We implemented the toggle task capability in this lesson, and for the next lesson we are going to work on CSS style and making the style much better. For the style, first of all, we are going to define a main class and set margin to 0 auto to make it center aligned, the main component, and set max width to 500 pixel. Let's add this class to main, and in the class name for the parent div, for the child div here, set class name to content. Go to index.css and right after main class define content class, and first of all define a border like 5 pixel thickness, and the color is C0C0FF light blue and solid. Define border radius like 5 pixel. Make font size a bit bigger, 20 pixel, and set a background color to light gray F0, 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 and create a padding like 20 pixel. Let's check the result. Much better. Let's go for the table. I'm going to add task 1, task 2, and I'm gonna make the table full width. To do that, after the content, for the table element, set width to 100%. For TD, I mean the first column, first child, set width, full width. And for the last child, TD, last child, define a minimum width of 1 to 5 pixel. Also for TH, we need to set text align to left because by default it's center aligned. And for alternative row, for even rows, set background color to a different color. I'm going to make it white. That's it about the table. Let's check the result. Yes, it's much better now. And the next step of styling is for input and button. What I'm gonna do for input and button, let's fix the typo for input, is increasing font size to 20 pixel, padding to 5 pixel, border radius to 5 pixel too, and create a border of 2 pixel, gray and solid. Also for button, set cursor to pointer. Yeah, here is the result, and if I enter a task, it's gonna be like this. Good. Next step is gonna be setting color for add, edit, and delete. For button.add, set background color to blue. It's gonna be 0080FF, and color is white. Copy this for edit, delete, save, and back. So rename it edit, delete, save, and back. For edit, use this code. Oops. Put hashtag before them, hashtag before all of them. For delete, use red, this code. Save, green, this code. And for back, gray. And then go to the create task, set class for the button to add, go to task item, set class for save button, class name to save, for back, class name to back, for the next two buttons, edit, class name to edit, and for delete, class name to delete. Save, and yeah, here is the styled to-do app, and it works perfect. Can you see? Save and back. That's it about the styling, and the last part of this lesson is saving data in the local storage. For saving data in the local storage, what's the problem? Here we have a list of tasks, and if I refresh, all of them will be gone. And that's not what we want. We are going to keep them in the local storage, and after refreshing the page and reopening this app, we are going to have our previous task in the list. Let's implement this feature together. In the task at the very top of the screen, out of the component, we are going to use local storage dot get item tasks. If we already have task in the local storage, then use json.parse and then pass this to json.parse function. json.parse function convert a string to JavaScript objects. If there is no value for task in the local storage, the default task is gonna be empty array. That's it about fetching task from local storage. Local storage is a storage to save temporary data in the client side, in the front end side. Good. We need to update the local storage using local storage.setItem. Where do we need to update it? The first place is in create task, and after setting state, we need to call local storage.setItem for tasks, and it's gonna be json.stringify task. Why do I use json.stringify? Because task is an array, is a JavaScript variable, and local storage only save data as a string. I'm using this function to convert this array to a string to be able to save it in the local storage. Copy this and paste it for all places that we have changed task. That's it. Let's test it. Enter a task, enter another task, and refresh the page. Also, we can close it and open it again, localhost 3000, and as you see, we have our task here. If we have any change to the task and refresh the page, we still have the updated change in the tasks. Great, that's it about Todo apps. What we did together is to implement a very simple React application, and we have used a lot of features of React, like decomposing component, state, props, setting CSS style, working with local storage, defining method, passing method to and props, passing data and props to child component, and handling to the event in the child component, in parent component, and a lot of React concept have been discussed in this React application. You can improve this by adding animation, by saving data in a backend API, and you can make this app much better. Until next lesson, bye-bye.